Time for our next panel discussion, and this is all on ethical AI, which has already been a huge part of the show today already. Now, let me welcome my guests to the stage. First of all, we're joined by Sachin Agrawal, UK Managing Director at Zoho. We're also joined by Bobby Blumofe, Executive Vice President and CTO at Akamai, and Deepak Paramanand, Director of Artificial Intelligence at JPMorgan Chase. Hi, to all of you. How are you?
Very good. Doing well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, doing great. Thanks for the opportunity, and thanks for having us.
Yeah, you're all very, very welcome indeed. We've just come back from our first networking break, so everyone is suitably fed and watered and ready to go again. So an awful lot for us to get through over the next sort of half an hour or 40 minutes. So less of me, more of you. That's always the best way to do these things. Where I'm going to start, though, is with the pressing concerns. Ethics are huge when it comes to AI, so many pressing questions, but let's look at the most pressing ethical concerns that are related to the development and deployment of AI technologies today. Bobby, we'll start with you on this one. For you, where do you see those most pressing concerns?
Well, AI is such a remarkable technology, and it's come so far over the last decade. It can do so much, but I think with that power does indeed come a smorgasbord of ethical concerns. There's so many potential answers here. One thing that I do like to emphasize, though, is that as much as people talk about the development concern of creating some super AI that could lead to a doomsday scenario, or things that we've seen in movies. Personally, I think that's a little bit of maybe a misplaced emphasis, and maybe taking away from the very real concern. That's a hypothetical one, but there's a very real concern of, rather than thinking about the doomsday scenario, what about the bad day scenario that I think we're experiencing today, and it's very real. We're seeing it in the elections. We're seeing it in social media platforms. We're seeing AI intentionally misused to deceive people, to humiliate people, and so I do think that it's important to focus not so much on the hypothetical doomsday scenario, but get to the here and now and the very real, very bad day scenario that we're dealing with day in, day out.
Absolutely. We've got the word smorgasbord and doomsday into the first answer, so we've started strong. Thank you, Bobby. Deepak, if we can come to you next, your thoughts on that, the most pressing concerns.
Right. So just to step back a little bit, right? The concern for me about AI is that we don't have a way to come back easily and fast, because the technology itself is so widespread, so important. There are no fast turnarounds, just like medicine. Like, you can't make a mistake. It's life and death. Not to say other things shouldn't be taken that seriously. Finance is important. Sales is important. Marketing is important. So many other things are important because they have fundamental large effects on people. But you make a mistake in finance, you can't turn around. Sales and marketing, you can run another campaign. Medicine, you can't. So can't you with AI. So when you have such a disruptive technology that has such widespread usage, such widespread implications, and when you can't turn around immediately, you've got to think about it differently. I was just telling Rob just a few minutes ago, the technology is created in a very small city, in one single state, in one country, but the impacts are felt all over the world. So for that reason, we must empower the makers to make sure they understand the implications of what they do, and this is why this is important.
Absolutely. And Sachin, if we come to you next on that, please.
Yeah, so small disagreement with Deepak there in terms of where the technology was created. I mean, probably the initial roots, but now a lot of it is being developed everywhere, and we are doing it, a lot of it in India right now as we speak, in Zoho. But I think, Neil, put this in two broad buckets. I think one is around trust and the other is around compliance. The way we see this is it's a new technology growing at the breakneck speed. Everybody's trying to figure out things. Everybody wants to use it. But there is a lack of trust. And when I talk about trust, I think three things. Misleading information, maybe wrong information as an output of AI, which could lead to bad outcomes, wrong business decisions, leading to loss. I think the second is bias and discrimination, which could come out of not so perfect AI models. And the third is privacy and security of information, which I think is a lot more important in a B2B context, where a lot of companies don't even understand and appreciate the implications of information of their customers and their customers' customers, getting shared at the wrong places because of the wrong use of AI. And then, so this is in terms of trust, and we have seen a lot of hesitation in companies in going full scale in the adoption of AI because of this. The other, of course, is compliance. At least, as we are seeing in the UK and in the larger Europe, we have the first EU Act around AI. And so, one has to be on the right side of law. And I think more legislation is coming.
I'll just pick up on one expression you used there, Sachin, to move on to our next question. You were saying about the breakneck speed, because if you're a solutions provider, a software provider, you want to be at the cutting edge. You want to be producing the best stuff first, obviously. And if you're a customer wanting to use the technology, you're wanting to put the stuff in place because, frankly, your competitors might be. So there's pressure, there's pace. But we can't forget about the ethics involved here. And this I'll put to all of you, how important is the consideration around ethics in AI doesn't get lost in that rush to be first and best? And Sachin, I'll start with you.
I'll answer to that. So just to clarify, I'm speaking to this from my experience while at Microsoft, not at JPMorgan. So just to get clarity around this. So look at what Microsoft has done and other companies have done. They have principles in place for this. They want to leave out the ambiguity. They don't want the builders to be confused about what they're doing. There is a set of people, the lawyers, the privacy regulators, the compliance folks, who come up with good regulation. And our job is to comply with it. It's not to be questioned, it's not to be discussed, because the laws and regulations are there for a good reason. Seatbelts were there for a good reason. Driving under the speed limit was there for a good reason. So there are guardrails, there are technologies, there are principles to be met. Yes, there are cumbersome. We will always overdo it initially because we don't know what the right mix is, but over a period of time, we will all learn. So yes, it may seem a little, over the top, a little too much right now, but that is going to be the case with something new like this. So I would say, like we did at Microsoft, start with some responsible AI principles, start implementing them, get some wins under the belt.
Yeah, certainly agree with that. And I think the premise of the question is an important one, because I think we are now living in this era of hype, and almost everybody has this, the FOMO, right? The fear of missing out. And that creates this momentum and desire to move very fast, adopt AI anywhere you can adopt it. And that's not a good approach, right? Everybody hears the term AI washing. I started my comments with AI being misused by bad actors, right? To deceive, to humiliate, whatever. But I think there's also a problem in the context of good actors, people who want to use AI for good, but because of the hype, they are misusing AI with good intention. And I do agree with Deepak. I think one of the things that you can do here is, slow down a little bit and start with some guiding principles. Make sure that your organization has those guiding principles in place in terms of how you want to adopt AI, where you want to adopt AI, and what kind of oversight you're going to be using as you adopt AI.
Yeah. I think I echo the thoughts I think shared by my fellow panelists. I think we have, based on our experience with working with a lot of companies, governance I think becomes extremely important. Some of the things companies that we have been able to adopt it successfully. Have some clear guidelines and value systems that they have been able to document. So, for example, what are your data policies? How do they align with your privacy policy? What kind of AI model are you developing? Even documenting it. I think all these things help. Aligning yourself with a fair bit of, I think information now is available about ethical AI principles. That helps. And I think some practices which are practical ways and means to ensure that AI is not generating something which you don't want. So we have seen shadowing, for example, I think is a very practical thing. A lot of our customers are adopting. AI agents will do a certain job, but don't just leave it to them. Have a human involvement as well to ensure that the outcome of the human, you can see how similar it is to the outcome of an AI engine. If it is 80% accuracy, maybe you go a little further down and let it automate. But if you see a 50% divergence, maybe you don't want to let it automate all on its own. So I think a combination of principles, guidelines, and some practical tools ensures that you get the positives and avoid the negatives.
Absolutely, those principles, guidelines, guardrails, as you said there, Deepak. Whilst we're on this particular area, we've mentioned a couple of times about regulation. Let's not go past that. Let's stick with that for a moment. For all of you, what role do you feel regulatory frameworks should play in guiding ethical AI practices? How can they be developed? How can they be implemented? What role does that play? I'll put that out to all of you. Who wants to take that one first?
Well, yeah. When it comes to regulation, that's an area that I'm not at all an expert on, but I think it helps to frame it and draw a distinction between regulating technology versus regulating use. Regulating the technology does come with the risk of stifling innovation. Now, I'm not saying that there isn't practical application and value in some form of regulation. For example, transparency, some of these risk-based frameworks that we're seeing, for example, coming out of Europe. I think there's probably some real value there, but I think where we're really lacking right now is regulating use of AI. There's things that you can do now that you just couldn't do before with this. Now that this technology is here, I mentioned examples of using AI to deceive people, to humiliate people, and so on. And again, there were things that you could do along those lines that if you're a bad guy that you just couldn't do before. And so I think the regulatory environment maybe has not quite yet caught up with these use cases. And that's an area where I think it really does make sense to be considering regulation.
We did a digital health survey. We do this every year, close to about 1,000 odd companies in both Europe and UK. There were some interesting findings from our last survey. About 50% of the businesses mentioned that they are looking for better AI regulation to protect them from the ill effects of the threat of AI. And about 30% of the companies mentioned that they are looking for some kind of government support in terms of education, in terms of training for their staff so that they can make effective use of AI. So I think on one hand, companies are also apprehensive that something goes wrong, how do we deal with it? On the other hand, they need support. So I think those were interesting findings. From our own experience, as a provider of this technology, our view on and experience on this is, while the regulation, I think with EU Act is good, put some guardrails in place. One area where it has not really touched is the data. The ethical use of data. So, and we can again look at it in the B2C and B2B context. I think in the B2C context, if you see, as consumers, we are all giving away our information about ourselves so that we can use these platforms for free, be it social media or all these kind of platforms. And clearly, the data is not really used very effectively. I'm diabetic, but all kinds of search engine recommendations that come my way are about all kinds of desserts that I should be eating. Now clearly my phone knows that I'm diabetic. The search engine knows that I'm diabetic, but what I receive as recommendations is not aligned with my condition. I mean, I may not be doing very financially well, but I'll be presented with all kinds of gizmos which will further stretch my credit card bills. So we know this is not going right. If you think about it in the B2B context, see what's important here is, so let's say we are a provider of CRM, right? I mean, the guardrails have to ensure that the data that we train on, for example, I mean, look at predictability of what is the right time to call a customer. This information through AI should be presentable to sales execs, so they make the right calls at the right time, and that helps them close better. But the AI engine needs to be trained only on the data that is relevant to one customer, and that's almost like a business secret of a company that does it very well. And that recommendation should not be available to another customer which uses our CRM itself to make their call timings better. So the engine needs to be confined within the customer data and should not be trained for information from one customer to be made available to the other. So, I mean, just an example, but there are all these nuances which the regulation doesn't cover right now. It is more self-imposed. I mean, as companies, we ensure that this privacy is rightly maintained.
And just to give another contrast, right? Look at the industries that have not done well with regulation. I mean, blockchain is a fantastic technology, only if they can be scandal-free and scam-free for 2 years. Can we please have that? Then the true power of the blockchain and cryptography can come to the fore, right? And medicine, thank God it's well regulated. But when you have newer technologies, the neural interfaces, they come in, you need different kinds of rules for it. So yes, the SB regulations in California are restrictive, but as I said, with anything new, we will go a little over the top because we don't understand the beast. We don't understand what we're dealing with, but it's much better than not having that. I mean, SOX compliance came because of the Enron massacre that came after that. We don't want that with AI. We don't want anything big like that with AI. So I would, even at Microsoft, initially as a person building the AI, I was not happy, but thank God it was there because I could trust a set of principles, a set of guardrails, a set of experts to do right by the company, by the users, because when I was building it, I didn't have the time to think. Now, would startups have that much time? I don't think so. But having such government regulation, having such kind of policies around helps everybody stay aligned, because like I keep saying, with this such a big disruptive technology, we may not have time to turn around. That's why this is important.
It's a good point. I mean, good regulation and oversight can create confidence that otherwise isn't there. And a lot of people are very afraid of AI. I think with due cause, with good reason. And if done right, you can imagine a scenario where those fears are abated because people are confident that there is the appropriate level of oversight and regulation.
Where I want to move on to next, it was mentioned briefly by one of you just a moment ago, is about transparency, which is obviously critical in when it comes to the ethics here. For all of you, how can transparency in AI development processes really be achieved? It's obviously not easy because there's certain things you want to protect, but it's also important to be open and transparent about how it works. We've seen a little about that on the show already today, popping the hood a little bit and seeing how some of these systems do work. How do we strike that balance between the transparency we need for ethics, whilst also being able to develop things with a degree of, not secrecy, but privacy, I suppose? How do we strike that balance between the two? I'll open it up to all of you. Whoever wants to take that first.
So all I can tell you from my experience what we did. So we had these principles in place, and we follow a typical machine learning development lifecycle. We didn't have sophisticated software back then to sort of track every single process, every single journey. So we audited, we documented, and we had discussions and code check-ins and product conversations with the auditors, with the people who were running the show to say, hey, we are in this journey, we're in the journey of collecting data, we're in the journey of building the model, we're in the journey of testing the model, and while doing that, how are we complying with it? Now, what I would have loved and still doesn't exist, so here's $1 billion idea, whoever is listening, you have integrated development environments. Why can't we have integrated ethical environments? As you write code, it can check against your regular principles. your EU AI guidelines or responsible AI principles and whatnot, and give you an indication of how well you're doing. For example, at the moment you have collected some data, let there be 10, 20 questions that must be answered. When you're using the data, let there be another 15 questions that can be answered. So on and so forth. So again, the ideal state would be, as you're writing the code, as you're building the system, as it's being deployed, to have automated checks going in there. But before that, you can happen. And again, I keep going to blockchain. The blockchain gives you a fantastic tool to sort of maintain the provenance of the data as it goes through, right? You could use that for responsible AI, right? So at the minimal, I would say documentation and discussion. Maximally, you could have automated systems getting in there.
I mean, I would add, most of us are in the role of consuming AI technology, not so much developing it. And I think as consumers of pre-trained models, it's incumbent upon us to demand transparency from the vendors. Don't use a pre-trained model without transparency. Insist that the vendor can tell you not only how the model is constructed, what's the structure of the model, but also, what data it was trained on. We have the power to do that, right, as consumers of the technology.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you raised a very, very valid point. I think most of this is around the data, because what goes and comes out. In fact, I think I was talking to my colleague who's our director of AI development. He was telling me at this point in time there are 600,000 open source AI models available. So just tons and tons of open source models that can be used. So it all comes down to I think one is documentation of the model that one is using, documentation of the data that one is using. I think we as providers of solutions which have AI capability built into it, and our own AI solutions, we use ethically sourced data to train our models, number one. And number two, ensure that the right boundaries are put in place for the training of open source models beyond a point when it's being used for the customer data. Like the example I was giving earlier. This is the example I was giving earlier was, one company versus the other company, the model needs to be within the confines of that company so that, the advantage that one has is not passed to the other. But I think it even exists at individual levels as well. So the right sizing of model can ensure that me as an individual, when accessing information, is accessing within my rights and permissions. If I want to know about the trends within my compensation, I should not be able to see that of something else. If I give a search on, show me all the documents within my team, the search engine needs to understand what my team is, and how it differentiates from some other team, because I could be part of different teams, and what should it show me? Whereas there could be some liberties around the type of data, which may be across different organizations. So things like spam, things like translation, it doesn't matter. Spam is the same for me as an organization as it is the same for some other organization. So those could be the topics around which the training of the model can be on a larger universe, but not on some other aspects. So a clear definition of what is the boundary within which the training is happening, on what data it is being trained. And I think what we have seen is the large language model is not really the solution to everything. For something which is to be within the confines of an organization or even a team within the organization, even a smaller or a narrow model is more effective because it can be fine-tuned. A large language model can't be fine-tuned. It has emergent behavior, so it will just learn on its own. It's very, very difficult for you to improve its efficiency. So the combination of the right models and the right boundaries to be defined, and if these are clearly documented, I think that helps the transparency. That's our experience.
I mean, I actually think there's an ethical part of that as well in terms of, not using LLMs for everything. I've been talking about this quite a bit and almost sort of pleading with developers, don't just throw an LLM at every problem you see. It's a cool technology, and I know we all want to say that we're using LLMs, but it's not the right answer for everything. It opens up a lot of concerns, one of which I mentioned ethical, is that you're in many cases using megawatts to solve problems that could be solved for milliwatts, and that's an ethical issue. Yeah, it's not the right answer for everything. Sometimes I joke that, even these specialized models, oftentimes, well, almost always, they started life as a foundational model, which means they were trained on the entire internet, basically, which means they know every movie that's ever been made, every TV show, every event in history, every state capital, every country, everything. And if you think about most enterprise use cases, if you're an insurance company trying to create a chat bot to help people file claims or something like that, do you really need a model that knows the cast of The Godfather? So it's overkill. And there's an ethical aspect to that. Use the right tool for the problem. Don't just throw an LLM at every problem you see.
I don't know, I'd love to have a chat with a chatbot who knows all about The Godfather. That'd brighten up my day when I'm trying to talk to my bank about my mortgage or something. That'd definitely brighten things up. Let's move on slightly, because there is the human side of this as well. Because the model or the AI technology could have been put in place, but it's often how the human using it and interacting it, that's often a rogue part of this. What are our thoughts on that, about how we actually try and direct the people side of this to make sure the technology is used ethically? That the people side of things has been a huge talking point of this show already. It keeps on coming up, so I'm going to keep pulling at that particular thread. What are our thoughts on that? How do we try and make sure that we keep the people part of this equation heading in the right direction? I would say under control, but that sounds a little bit Big Brother, but heading in the right direction. Whoever wants to take that first.
Happy to go. I mean, there's a number of things that. Well, so let me start with this is an important framing right here. I think obviously it starts with the people, because we're the ones who are actually implementing, using, consuming. So yeah, the people aspect is important. So the obvious answer, and maybe everybody who's going to, at least to some extent, go here, is the educational part of this. Oftentimes, I start my talks with a quote from the science fiction writer Arthur C. Clarke, futurist as well, where he says that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And that's an important statement when it comes to AI, because we're now living in a world where AI is impacting all of our lives in very profound ways. But to most people, it's indistinguishable from magic, and magic can be you can ascribe any power to magic. So that's a huge problem. And for those of us in an enterprise, in a business context who are looking at AI, there's another pitfall that we can fall into when we're not properly educated, which is the pitfall of the demo. These technologies, LLMs, generative AI, they demo spectacularly, but oftentimes the reality is very different. And I'm not saying that these technologies aren't valuable, they're not useful, they're not good, but the demos oftentimes can lead to incorrect conclusions, especially if you're not properly grounded in how the technology works, what it really can do, what it can't do. So I always start from the point of view of AI literacy. And by the way, that's probably an issue not just for those of us working in enterprise, but also for society at large. We're probably heading into a world where, just as 10 years ago, digital literacy was important for everybody, I think we're heading into a world now where AI literacy is a universal issue.
Also, if you look at the data, look at the humans and how they have interacted with the world, right? You typically don't go on the internet to talk about something good that's happened, because you actually go and experience it. Well, on the other hand, you want to rant about something bad. You want to talk bad things about other people on X, on Twitter, or whatever that is these days. So the internet is full of problems people have had for centuries. I doubt anybody is going to come up with a new problem humanity has not had before. If they do, that's an original problem, and that person is not human. So if you take that data that is full of problems, full of not good content, you're going to train a model based on that. Guess what the model is going to tell you? All the bad stuff. So I had this situation where a 40-year-old woman was telling me, I'm taking advice from ChatGPT on dating. Well, the ChatGPT back then was offering that. Now there are better tools. The GPT will tell you, no, I can't give you advice. But my sort of thought experiment with her was that, look, you're going to say, I have this problem and that problem. You know what? People before you have had the problem. So it will give you the solution, but that is not your solution. It is somebody else's solution. So go there only to figure out the commonality of the problem, but don't seek that solution from them, because then you are experiencing it. The LLM isn't. So the humanness is the experience. The humanness is not just the text output, because, hello, good morning is what I would say. And somebody would say good evening or good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world and some other language, but it's not human. The experience is human. So I like the fact that the model, these LLM these days are outright saying, look, I can't offer you these things or that things. It's a good start, but we end up, still saying hallucinations, which is wrong, which is because we're trying to attach a human construct to an LLM. The right word is confabulations, because that's a technical term. So the LLMs confabulate, they don't hallucinate. So we should stop doing that. Stop using that word, start applying human logic and human kind of empathy to these technologies, because they're not. That's my answer.
I will probably cover a slightly different dimension to this. I think there is given so much hype about this technology and the FOMO around it, there is this expectation mismatch about what the technology can do for me. A lot of business leaders, they think that okay, I need AI, and they will get AI, and then in 3 weeks they expect some magic to happen. So and then they get back and say, oh, no, I don't see any change. My worker productivity is still the same. So I think there is a expectation setting, the right kind of assessment of what prerequisites are needed before AI can start delivering for your organization. I think there is a bit of education, actually a lot of education required on this front as well, so that there isn't that disillusionment about the technology. It is rightly understood and the right kind of homework happens. What we have seen is that a strong prerequisite to AI maturity is digital maturity. Most organizations are not digitally even mature. They don't have their processes streamlined. They don't have their data streamlined. It is still available in silos within departments. And before all that can happen, AI can't even make sense of this whole data, create that holistic view and make the right kind of recommendations. So some process streamlining, data streamlining, dumb automation just to make sure information is flowing within the organization. All that needs to be in place before AI can start delivering. And we have seen, in 4 to 6 months, maybe one can expect about 10% impact. That's based on working with a lot of customers. It should be an initial goal. So that's something to keep in mind when one is thinking about the human aspect of AI, when to go for it and what to expect.
Yeah, unfortunately not completely the magic wand as much as we'd like it to be sometimes. And we've got about 5 minutes left, so I'm going to finish on one final question, if I may, and that's a little look towards the future. For all of you, and if we could try and keep this to 30 seconds to a minute each, I'd be very grateful. What do you see as the future challenges we're going to be facing with ethical AI? What's going to be the biggest future challenge that's coming around the corner? Deepak, apologies, I'll start with you. What would you see as the biggest future challenge?
People are going to start accepting bad stuff as the norm. We shouldn't. We should just demand more. Netflix captions came because people wanted captions. Now I can't see a movie without captions. And I'm irritated to go to a movie theater and say, why are there no captions? Because I want it there. So we shouldn't stop demanding more. Consumers should demand more. The challenge will be that we're going to have much more AI, much more AI. We call it in AI the explore versus exploit conversation. The current AI is just getting better and better just by throwing more computation at it. Imagine the state when you have more computation and even better architectures, even more better use of technology, better use of electricity, nuclear fusion. So the AI is going to get much, much more complex, much more sophisticated. I worry that we're going to let our guard down. We're going to demand more and demand less from the people and just agree to, the word hallucinations. That's my challenge, that we shouldn't. We should demand more, we should demand better, and keep at it and keep asking for better AI.
Yes, the captions on, captions off debate. You've just tapped into one of the biggest arguments in the Perry household. So the counselling's going well. I'll get through it with your support. Thank you very much, Deepak. Sachin, we'll come to you next on that. The biggest future challenge for you when it comes to ethical AI?
From my point of view, there is so much hype about this technology. I think that the challenge I see is that if not seen in the right perspective, if not approached with the right assessment of where am I as a business, what do I need to do to get out of the right AI, it can lead to either of the two things. It can lead to too much investment going into AI with very little outcome, because the organization is not ready for it. It needs, I was talking about still a lot more things in terms of basic digital maturity, or it can mean some guardrails were not put in place in terms of the privacy concerns being addressed, and that could also lead to a negative outcome. So the right assessment, from my standpoint, is important, and the power of AI needs to be married with a very strong sense of privacy that the solution provider needs to bring to table along with the AI technology, so that it is compliant and is not being misused.
Thank you. And Bobby, I'll give you the final word on this.
Yeah, I think, very similar to what, what the other two said. I think there's a real danger in sort of this hype cycle that we're in, especially when you're coupling that with the fact that for most people, AI is effectively magic, and the fact that it demos so spectacularly. So you have these misset expectations that I think lead to overuse of AI, or maybe just wrong use. Maybe AI is the right solution to a problem, but using the wrong tool. For example, an LLM when a simple deep learning model would suffice. And that leads to all kinds of problems, which includes, just garbage, output. It includes way overuse of energy, and it includes, hate speech and all kinds of misinformation. So there's a lot of potential dangers here. So advice, everybody, get educated and don't be suckered by the demos.
Great advice indeed. Well, we've covered an extraordinary amount in 40 minutes, and look at this, we've actually finished bang on time, which absolutely never happens. So thank you very much indeed for that. Really enjoyed your company, and thanks for joining us here at Tech and AI Live, Gen AI.